So of course, first, our main the main reason you're here is LeeAnn Kittle, Executive Director of Sustainability at Denver Public Schools. She's got quite a long career and vaunted career in sustainability, and you'll hear a little bit about her program, why they chose ESPC, and a lot more from her. Dale Hawes is going to be conducting the interview. He is a longtime ESPC expert. He's consulting with us to put some of these webinars together. And I'm Liz Stewart. I've been at Berkeley Lab for about 15 years, and I work on the eProject Builder, eProject Express program and the ESCO industry research that we do. Dana Robson, also Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, works on the eProject Express outreach and development side. And then we have Laura Carpenter from the Department of Energy, who's going to tell you a bit about some of the DOE resources that are out there for the folks in the state and local sectors around ESPC. So with that, Dale, I would like to hand it off to you and let you take it from there.
Great, Liz, thanks. And, post lunch, I'm always excited to get engaged and have these conversations with learned folks who've experienced the kinds of things that LeeAnn is going to share with us. It's just really a wonderful piece of information that she's going to share from her history and what she's been doing in the good work at Denver Public Schools. So LeeAnn, if you would just give us a little background about the district, maybe as a backdrop to our conversation today.
Sure, let me share my screen real quick. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Make sure you're able to see this.
Yes.
Excuse me. Okay. Let me hide all of you guys and then we'll get going. Okay, so LeeAnn Kittle, Executive Director of Sustainability for Denver Public Schools. And I'm just going to give you a quick sense of who we are before we get into ESPC. You may hear me say EPC because I'm apparently lazy here in Colorado, but it means the same thing. So for Denver, we are the largest school district in the state of Colorado. We have roughly 90,000 students and 15,000 employees. We have 207 schools and 36% of our students are English language learners. From a sustainability standpoint, we've done district-wide LED retrofits. We have done a district-wide e-gauge, which we're about halfway done with installing. But we have secured the funding for the rest of the school districts, which we're excited over the next 2 summers to finish that. We have done the second largest ESPC in the state's history here in Colorado. We have 46 sites with solar. We just finished a community solar canopy that we did at one of our campuses where a portion of that energy actually goes to DPS families in need to offset their utility. And that's part of a larger effort from the city and county of Denver. So it's no cost to us. We're just hosting it. It's a really great relationship with the city and county of Denver. And it's one of 11 canopies and counting. And then we also have been doing solar shade structures for our outdoor classrooms. And that's really just to get our community involved in what solar is. What does it look like? Because most of the time it's on a roof and you don't have any connection to it. So that intent is to really engage not only our students, but also our community in solar. We have 3 electric buses on the road today. We have 20 more on the way. That was secured through state and federal funding. We have 132 gardens across our district. We also have a renewable energy academy. Our students were very keen on making sure that we're preparing them for a green economy. So we have this academy to support careers within renewable energy. We have done geothermal and heat pumps in about 12 of our schools, and we will be opening our first all-electric school come August. So we had, just to tell you a quick story of how we got to where we are today, we had 30 students across 8 different schools come together to urge our Board of Education to pass a climate action policy. And they did that during a pandemic at a time they did not know each other. And they did that through public comment, at board meetings, met with board members, met with city council members, got endorsements from principals and community leaders. And they were successful in the fact that they passed it with unanimous vote. And so that gained national attention. And they received the Presidential Environmental Youth Award and got to go to Washington, D.C. to accept that. And then also Washington, D.C. came to Denver Public Schools, as you can see on the bottom right. VP Harris came to Denver Public Schools to meet these students, connect with them, and understand their concerns for their future. So our policy reads, DPS shall be a national leader in establishing an organizational culture anchored in sustainability, climate action, and environmental justice in both the conservation of natural resources and in minimizing the carbon footprint of DPS's practices. So in response to this policy, so the students gave us the why. They said, we have climate anxiety. This is real for us. We're afraid for our future. The Board of Education gave us the what. Here's your policy. You need to work on climate action. And so we really needed to figure out the how, and we did a climate action plan. We have 3 North Star goals. We call them North Star because they're 2050. They're really far out. But as a team, we have a mission of environmental protection, economic prosperity, and social development. And so we developed our goals around that mission of reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions by at least 90%. We want to reduce natural resource consumption and waste year over year. And all students or staff are engaged in sustainability by 2050. We then, over the course of a year, which I don't recommend, I would do it in a longer period. It was a lot to do in 1 year. Created a climate action plan across 6 frameworks, and that's built environment, transportation, resource management, wellness, engagement, environmental justice, and career and curriculum. The built environment and resource management is essentially areas and quite frankly, transportation as well, that an ESPC can support. So that's pretty much 50% of our climate action plan can be supported through energy performance contracting. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing so that I can see everybody.
Wow, LeeAnn, that's a lot. In a short period of time, you've really shared with many of us the kind of challenges that exist all across the nation with lots of different areas to be focused on at the same time in such an incredibly short period of time. So how did you get from having those challenges to thinking, well, we need to use performance contracting here?
So ironically, we actually embarked on our 2nd largest energy performance contract in the state's history prior to coming up with our climate action plan and decarbonization goals. And so it was my 5th energy performance contract at the time. So I'd certainly learned all the things you need to learn, which we'll talk about today. But it certainly is a good mechanism to get to your decarbonization goals. We use it for efficiency goals. So it helped us we have that resource management goal. That was how energy performance contracts supported our climate action plan, even though we didn't have the plan in place yet. But it certainly has helped us. We've done solar through our energy performance contract, irrigation controls, as well as a bunch of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades.
Wow. And so, we know from our experience, and maybe some of the folks online here don't quite have that level of experience, but there's so many people, it seems like, that you have to aggregate and bring together, so many different folks that you have to touch. How did you go about bringing all those different folks to be proponents of what you wanted to do?
I jokingly say that I do a weekly TED Talk. So it is a lot of gathering the masses and presenting, but I find that education is the #1 thing. We fear failure. So when it's something new, and we haven't done it before, those that are impacted most, like our mechanical, electrical, plumbing teams, our QA/QC team, our asset management facilities, plan design, construction, all of the folks that essentially have to implement this type of work and then deal with the changes of that work on a day-to-day basis. It's about educating them and letting them know that, hey, this is an opportunity for us to get capital needs met today. That's brand new boilers, brand new chillers, brand new heat pumps, without potentially without putting any money down and paying that back with utility savings over time. And so when you have aging infrastructure, I think the conversation to folks that might be resistant to that change is about how this supports their work how they benefit from this, and essentially getting new equipment to have to maintain versus the old infrastructure that we're currently dealing with.
Sure. And all of us know that we've been running those schools for hundreds of years the same way. So, we often have remarked over time that it's the person that says no. It's that loud person kind of behind scenes. For you, was there anybody particularly, any group particularly that stood out that you had to pay special attention to?
Yes, I would say honestly all of the trades, and rightfully so, because again, it impacts them the most. But one thing that I think that I've learned through this process is that getting to your design standards, focusing on your design standards, make sure that they're up to date, make sure that all of the teams agree with what they are, and that there's a communication between the ESCO, the Energy Savings Company, as well as you, the organization embarking on this contract, that we have specific standards, we have specific specs, and we want to maintain consistency within our equipment across our schools. So I think focusing on that, and then also just bringing them in early in the conversation so that they are part of the decisions and not being told what's happening with an energy performance contract along the way. The first time I did one, I learned that the hard way because when I was trying to, lack of a better word, sell an energy performance contract internally, I was focused on the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer, those that would essentially sign off on this contract, not recognizing how much it impacts frontline staff. And so by the second and third time I've done one, it was about engaging those folks up front so that they have a say, they can be heard, and let the ESCO know that we do have these design standards and this is what we expect when it comes to our mechanical and electrical equipment. And let them just have a seat at the table.
There are a couple of really important points there. So I'll reiterate a little bit, clarify if I get off base here. But one of the really key things is that within the instruments that you put on the street to engage the ESCO community is that we have these design standards and all projects will have to meet or exceed it. It's only fair to spring that on them up front, so to speak. And of course, as soon as you can have all your people with their that'll have hands-on, the real folks that are living in these facilities, managing and maintaining them, to be engaged in the process, so much great information. Or as an old man like me would say, they also know where the bones are buried.
Well, and I'll add to that, very true on the bones, where the bones are buried. Just a couple examples of what I had in regards to that culture shift is that we had an ESCO who came in and was changing nomenclature of our controls. That was conducive to the software in which they were using as part of one of their technical services that they were offering, which was supporting our operations. And so it was kind of like fault detection diagnostics within our controls. And I won't get into that, but nevertheless, that nomenclature change was not what our team wanted. And so how can we mitigate that up front and make sure that there's like a memorandum of understanding between the two organizations of like, another example is we had boiler controls, or we did not have boiler controls, and our ESCO wanted to put boiler controls in, which I rightfully so wanted, because from an energy management standpoint, that makes sense. But that culturally wasn't where we were yet. And so when you have small things like that, how can you engage your frontline staff, your technicians, in those conversations up front to learn why? Because more often than not, we do things and we don't explain the why, and then they're dealing with the consequences of that. But if they hear the why, they understand the why, and then it's also hearing why they might be apprehensive to those changes. And then offering, is it training? Do we need to get you training? Is it because you haven't worked on boiler controls before? Things like that. So allowing that two-way conversation among the two organizations to happen quickly, happen up front, and make sure that it never slips through the cracks, and that all the trades are heard, because it's truly day-to-day that it impacts their teams the most.
Wonderful perspectives, LeeAnn. It's just remarkable to hear, over a couple of decades of doing this stuff, you also learn to recognize that these contracts aren't 1-year warranty and gone. You're looking for the resultant of the projects to last year over year, and you need those teams of people pulling the oars in the same direction. You know, it would be tragic if someone would decide to fight against what you were trying to achieve, both from a sustainability and from an energy standpoint in the project. So bringing them along, finding out what's needed, incredibly important. And the Tower of Babel has existed forever. As you mentioned up front, some people PC, some EPC, some ESPC, and there's always a wonder, are they different or are they the same, right?
Yep, I'm just lazy.
And surely next week there'll be another new set of acronyms that'll fall right in there. So looking at the different kinds of contracts, the different decisions that needed to be made and how they were made, I mean, a lot of that becomes really important, particularly for the procurement people. And as you said, the hands-on folks. How did you manage all those changes and what came into play?
Well, we did go out for bid. So it was like any other contract. We went out for bid. We also, the most recent one that I did, we did not put any capital down. I have been part of it where we have put capital down either from bond reserve dollars or general fund. But we utilized a certificate of participation to open this contract up. And through our bid process, the ESCO in which we contracted with, we ended up doing multiple stages. So at one point, in the court of public opinion, it was like, well, why are you constantly using this ESCO? So I think it's about being very transparent as to why you're choosing one over others to the community, because it is rather large. For us, it was a $31.4 million contract, at least at Denver Public Schools. And I think it's very important to be transparent to the community as to why you chose that contractor. But also, if you're going to go, every single EPC that I've done, there's just multiple phases, because you get into it and you realize, wow, there's all this other opportunity too. We could do this to offset that, and so on and so forth. And so if you're going to do multiple phases, I would just make it very clear to the community as to why you maybe are remaining within that contractor, or go out for bid again. And whether they get chosen or not is neither here nor there, but at least you're doing the process and the due diligence of that RFP process. But for us, we also, you know, in terms of all the stakeholders that need to get involved, you have your finance team, you have your sourcing team, you have even your communications team involved in this as well. So, so that you are very transparent to the community.
And then there's that select group of people also known as board members.
Yes.
Turns out they may need to be involved too.
Yes, they do. They have to sign off on a contract of that size. And luckily our board is a proponent of sustainability, given obviously we passed a policy to focus on it. But I have been in organizations that aren't as supportive. To me, it's about a triple bottom line for us, that back to that economic, environmental, and social. And what I find that no matter who you're talking to, they will fit into one of those areas. So that cliche of like, know your audience is super true. In a organization prior to Denver Public Schools, I was at that, they did not pass a bond for many, many years. And so I knew it was all about economics. We had aging infrastructure. We were, lack of a better way of saying, cash poor. And this was a perfect financial mechanism to support the infrastructure needs that we had. And we could show our constituents that we were being efficient with our utility fund or our utility budget. Another thing on that is that a lot of people view a utility budget as fixed, and it's a variable. We have an opportunity to not give that money to the utility, but rather put it into capital planning. And I think it's just about drawing those lines and creating that narrative so that whether your organization's focused on economic, environmental, social, they'll see the benefit and value.
Yeah, again, wonderful points to be made. And I'm just jazzed to be a part of this where the listeners can gain so much. I want to make a small point there, ask you about that. And then I know we have a great question posed by the audience that we want to get engaged as well. But as you think about that budget management, I've often worked with large public entities, and if they're short on their budget, they'll find the money somewhere else. School districts, maybe not so much. It sort of looks like a fixed set of money. And so when you need to move it from column A to column B, folks aren't always so happy about that. I suspect there was a little education about how you're saving energy dollars, and then how do you get that money to be applied to, if you will, this repayment of capital investment?
So I have been blessed with a very sharp CFO who completely understands this model and understands that it isn't necessarily, it's not revenue, right? It's cost avoided. And so it's the story, the narrative of like, this is what it would have been had we not done this. And so while that might not speak to the bottom line in terms of making those COP payments, if you've got good partnership with your finance team, which you absolutely should going into this, they'll be able to help support and make sure that those payments are being made. But I've also been in an organization where it just didn't land with the CFO and it just didn't make sense. And I'm not going to see these savings, and it's just calculations. And it's like, no, it's real, it's guaranteed. And I think through measurement and verification is an incredibly important piece to all of this. And so for Colorado, I'm not sure how it works across states, but for us, we have a program through our Colorado Energy Office where it's essentially they're our third-party reviewer. And so the ESCO does a measurement and verification, meaning they're literally measuring their savings and verifying and guarantee that you have those savings. And then we have the Colorado Energy Office signing off on that and saying, yes, this is true. I would offer up to this group, if you're going to go into an energy performance contract, and you do have this program, certainly lean on it. If you don't, I think it's important to hire a third party. And I would even offer, even if you do have a program like we do, that it still would benefit you to hire a third party to support not only the measurement and verification process, but the selection of type of MMV that you're going to go into up front, so that you know all the variables going into your calculations, which is a whole nother thing that I certainly want to talk about today, but maybe that I can save that for a later time if we've got other questions to get to.
Well, thanks for that response. And Liz, if you'd open your mic, I don't see the question. Yep. What's been posed here?
Okay, we've got two questions. First, we had someone ask, Robert Jordan, wanting to know what a certificate of participation is. And the other key question is for you, LeeAnn, how did you go to bid? Based on a markup with various statements of work from the different ESCOs, or did you engineer and develop a specific statement of work?
I might need you to repeat the second question, but the first one, a certificate of participation, is essentially a loan nonprofit organizations like K-12 can utilize, and it's got really low interest rates, but is essentially a type of loan through a bank. And then that second question, can you
yeah, Ken Patterson wondered, how did you go to bid? Did you base it on a markup with various statements of work from different ESCOs, or did you engineer and develop a specific statement of work? So maybe how did you choose your ESCO might be the question he's getting at.
We have, so we put a statement of work out there of what we needed and what we wanted, but then we have a pretty rigorous evaluation team. So I guess in that question, I would say the former of the two is how we did
so
it.
If I can help, just
Sure.
I think seeing both sides of this, your selection of the ESCO was value-based. I think your discussion of bids was based on equipment decisions, if I understand correctly.
It was not on the facility improvement measures, correct, yes.
Right. So I think that's the difference in, I think what he was reaching for is, how do you get apples to apples comparisons from different statements of work that might come from ESCOs? and compare them and make a value-based decision on which ESCO you're going to engage in for the project?
I think the biggest challenge with that is that what I've found against with evaluating different contractors is that the one that we ended up selecting had a lot of technical services that other ESCOs did not offer, at least not in the manner in which we needed. So as an example, we had a technical service that was essentially like controls. Gosh, I can't remember. It was master systems integration is what it was called. And it helped us clean up all of our controls and make sure that we have multiple types of controls in our buildings, multiple manufacturers. And so how do you get them to all speak the same language, especially when you have a lot of Frankenstein mechanical equipment across the district. And so for us, I think it was easier when it came to the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades and the actual equipment evaluation from one team to the next. But for me, for us, it was actually additional services that we got out of the ESCO that maybe made it easier to decide between one ESCO over another.
Yeah, that's great. And, of course, there are a number of different ESCOs and there are a number of different needs across America. And it just makes sense that in some cases, you can tell what fits and what doesn't. And those value-based decisions are incredibly important when you're not starting with a set of drawings and specifications for someone to bid to, like you might be in a conventional general contracting project. So one of the things...
Sorry, there was one question out here that's not directly for LeeAnn. I just wanted to bring it up. I don't think we can answer it on this webinar, but someone in New York State says there are unique obstacles to ESPC work in higher ed, namely a ban on assumption of new debt. However, their K-12 schools and community colleges use use ESPC with good results. So apparently New York higher ed uses PPA. So just put a question out there. Would love to hear other people's comments. So any folks that are paying attention to the chat, take a look at that question from New York about this obstacles to new debt, particularly in higher ed. Just wanted to kind of highlight that.
And then I'll just weigh in a very loud way. I've had the blessing to be on lots of stages with lots of microphones and remind people that states are sovereign. The laws are independently different from place to place. And so each marketplace has its own jurisprudence that guides how this work is done typically. And when there's a challenge like that, we've also had the benefit of coming alongside policymakers and sitting with them and walking through why is it that this separates us from another area in the state where this is being used? What is it that we need to resolve, so that we can move forward? So just a brief idea there. But LeeAnn, back to all the work that it takes to really accomplish what you're working through in Denver Public Schools. And you mentioned a little bit certificates of participation being one, a sort of loan based on the value of the properties, as I recall. What other means of funding have you used to coordinate the efforts with energy savings performance contracting to help leverage the concept and get the most amount of work done?
So ESSER and the ESSER, the acronym is completely is the CARES Act. It was the CARES Act funding, federal funding that we used during COVID. So we utilized that in conjunction with our energy performance contract to really make those dollars go further. And so the ESSER funds or CARES Act funds, we got filters, we got HVAC equipment upgrades, we got controls work done, we did all kinds of things to support our COVID needs, but at that same time supported the upgrades from the energy performance contract and also conflicted with it at times. And so it was important for us to make sure that the ESCO was aware of all these changes that we were making, especially from an operational standpoint, like running 24/7. Remember that when we thought that that was the solution? So it was kind of a precarious time to have an EPC because of COVID. So all of those operational changes impacted their guaranteed savings, right? They projected it to be based on current trends of how we operated, and that was all blown out when COVID hit. So luckily, though, we were able to utilize federal funds to support that effort. So the other thing, though, when you're talking economics like that I really hope folks take away from this is that when you're a K-12 organization, it's not like you've got someone who's trained in energy performance contracting. And I've certainly seen it across the nation, and I've supported folks in K-12 based on lessons I've had on how difficult these contracts are. Difficult should not equate to don't doing, because they're a great financial mechanism, but there are things to definitely be aware of when you go into this, when it comes to your inputs and outputs, when it comes to the pro forma or the financial projections. So things like your utility escalation. For utility escalation, when you're going to budget, we know, for an example, at least here in Colorado, electricity is 3% year-over-year increase. That's been that way for 25 plus years. Well, when you budget, maybe you're budgeting 3.5 to 4% to make sure that you've got all of your schools covered. For an EPC, I would suggest going as close to actual escalation that you see, because that's how they're calculating those savings. That's how the ESCO is calculating those savings. So be as true to actual costs as you possibly can when it comes to utilities. There's also de-escalation for depreciating assets like solar. Make sure that you agree on that de-escalation for that. There are ongoing costs for like new software. So we did irrigation upgrades, and now we had a 5-year contract that was ongoing costs, and understanding what those ongoing costs could be. Even understanding the profit margin of the ESCO, only to educate yourself, to understand that that's something that's, out there and real. And then also your interest rate. Is your interest rate conducive to doing an ESCO, or is buying outright and doing the capital yourself make sense? So far, I have learned in K-12, it tends to be where EPC is beneficial, because again, we're cash poor. And so being able to, and I say that lightly, cash poor, but generally speaking, definitely could use more funding within K-12 across the nation. And so EPCs are a good mechanism for that. But I think these are all things that are incredibly important to understand. As an example, I found a $2 million error in one of our contracts, and that was through asking how they had calculated our solar. So for this particular example, we had legacy solar that existed prior to the contract that was on a regular SG rate. And they came in and said, hey, we can change that to time of use and save you money. Well, we said, okay, great, let's do that. Even though that was not their work, it was their finding of an opportunity to save money with that rate change. Then we did solar on our own, and that was time of use as well. But one was time of use A, one was time of use B, because of grandfathered ratings with the utility company. And those calculations were incorrect. So it's just knowing how, and that's totally okay. Like that happens. And that's why you have measurement and verification. That's how we found it. The ESCO fixed it. Everything was good. But I think that's why measurement and verification is important, and understanding what that means. What are all those inputs? What are all those outputs? Being very comfortable with it, and making sure that you have consulted folks if that's not your area of expertise. You have consulted folks to make sure that you're comfortable with all of those variables.
Wow, so much great information in such a short period of time. LeeAnn, thanks for sharing that. I think the information regarding utility escalation, and certainly with renewables de-escalation and depreciation and how all that fits in, it all makes a great deal of sense, and it adds so much integrity to the project when you have the ability to walk a financial thinker through, this is how we're compensating for that. We're looking at the last years of energy escalation. We didn't just make these numbers up. this is what it's looked like for the past several years. And so we would have to anticipate that it might continue on that path. When those things aren't done, then you find those big fluffy numbers that, well, it just makes it hard to reach those levels of savings in some cases, for sure. And how you're aggregating finances for deep infrastructure changes and the engagement of renewables, all that is wonderful input in today's world, and how you can go about leveraging an energy savings performance contract, for sure. So it's fun for me. I've been around this for a long time to hear you talk about a lot of this stuff. There may be some folks on our time in the audience today that aren't quite as familiar. How do you get through this language stuff? And, you know, you're talking about pretty intense calculations. I've been the loud voice saying, hey, if it's not written down in third grade math, you shouldn't be expected to understand it. How do you walk the ESCO and, frankly, your internal Denver Public Schools team through those kind of considerations so that you have something that's transparent and easy to understand?
So I find it to be my job to be the translator. We have engineers from the ESCO talking to our technicians. We have, sales individuals from the ESCO talking to our finance folks. And so everybody speaks a different language. And I found it to be my job of like, let me just translate and make sure we're all speaking the same language. And so it was constantly having meetings and presentations to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And I say this, I don't know if there was a better analogy, but I always say, you'll get the Bible when all you want is the verse. And so I just make it very clear and transparent, and this is what we're after, and this is what the results are. We were above, below what we expected, so on and so forth. When you get into the nitty-gritty of all of this, you lose a lot of people. So I think it's finding an individual who can manage the contract in your organization that can be the translator, quite frankly. And if you don't have someone internally, then see if you can contract somebody out that is not the ESCO, that has no skin in the game, and can really translate this conversation, because it is very different languages between an engineer, a technician, a financial partner, and your communications team, all of it. So everyone speaks different languages.
Yeah, it's full-time work, isn't it?
It is. I jokingly said to our ESCO, our contractor, I said, I think I talk to you more than I do my own team.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a wonderful job of it. I know there's an important ESSER question here about delivering a project in the time frame allocated based on the funding requirements. Liz,
someone's asking because they're struggling to do so. We are as well. So it's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. And I think we really struggled even understand the timelines for all of them, because it got quite convoluted between different teams within our 15,000 employee organization. But we definitely are struggling, and actually had to cut a few projects because we're just not going to get it done in time. And some of that is just supply chain issues because of COVID. And I don't know that that was taken into account, that there was going to be such difficulty getting some of these pieces of equipment in time.
Great. And I'm bound to watch the clock here. So I just want to personally thank you for sharing the insights that you have regarding the great work that you're doing at Denver Public Schools. It's phenomenal to hear how an industry that kind of grew up in the last 25 years is actually delivering as promised the leverage benefits. Still, when I think about that, there's just so much data. I mean, somebody's looking at where to file these contracts and the spreadsheets that do the calculations, and, am I exceeding the guarantee, and where's all that utility data? And it kind of goes on. And it only makes good sense for me to perhaps point to our friends at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and say, Liz and Dana, share with us a little bit about how we might go about collecting, preserving, and managing that data, if you would.
Thanks, Dale. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. So thanks. That's a great segue, because obviously there's a lot of documentation and data needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to go into a piece of today's webinar where we talk a little bit about eProject Express, and then we're also going to share information about US DOE resources for non-federal folks with ESPC. So first of all, you clearly heard that ESPC is a great tool that brings together this nexus of creating healthy and safe working and learning environments, helping you, leverage your funds, your grants, helping you steward your, the funds available, and reducing not just your costs, but also the emissions. And so eProject Express is specifically designed for state, local governments, and educational institutions to help them document, track, and be able to report and demonstrate the ongoing value of their ESPC projects. So it is designed specifically for state, local, and educational. It's free, maintained by Berkeley National Lab with the funding from the US DOE. It's user-friendly, particularly eProject Express. There is the eProject Builder system, and then the much streamlined eProject Express system. So it's designed to help you track and report on your project investments, including the estimated guaranteed and achieved savings. You could track your GHG impacts if you'd like to. It gives a standard way for ESCOs to provide both the initial project information in a summary format and M&V summary data. That makes it a little easier for you to report out to stakeholders. And then really critical, it's like a centralized location, like a digital filing cabinet centralized, where you can keep your information in perpetuity and access it whenever you need it. So in terms of for school districts in particular, it's having that data through like staff turnover or even equipment turnover, things like that. It's a central, government database. It's secure. Only you access your projects, your ESCO, and you access your projects. So it's got your information in there accessible on demand. And so there are sort of reports that you can output. You can create custom reports and ways that it makes it easy for you to report out. As I mentioned, it retains those critical document files. And so that helps simplify the ongoing management of your data. One thing that I'll also mention is that when you have your projects in eProject Express and you start entering your M&V results, there's a feature that will send out automatic reminder emails that your next year's M&V report is due. So that's been a very helpful feature. And then ESCOs actually have told us they like eProject Express. First of all, it's very streamlined. Those ESCOs that use both the full-featured eProject Builder, which maybe some of you are or are not familiar with, they like EPX because it just saves them a lot of time. It's much streamlined, but it still, collects a significant amount of information for the customer. They're happy that the customer can access their own information online, and also the customer or institution can use the eProject Express template and say, these are the data we want you to collect. It's a pretty straightforward one-page form to fill in. And Johnson Controls person told us, this quote here, that it just took them a lot less time, something that takes them maybe an hour to get data in, and it's there for the years through the performance period. It just saves them a lot of time finding it, years down the road. So first of all, I'll hand it off to Dana to just talk about a few of the features of eProject Express.
Okay, thanks, Liz. As Liz was mentioning, eProject Express provides an easy way to store your project documents. This is in the project document section. It's a file storage for all types of documents. You can save Word files, JPEGs, zip files, spreadsheets, PDFs, whatever you want. ESCOs and customers can both access this section so that they can save vital project documents and preserve access during the performance period. The filing cabinet saves time finding documents that you need and helps prevent disputes and other challenges associated with document losses. And if you can see, there's a little file checklist above the upload a file button. That file checklist is actually a drop-down menu that shows you examples of the types of documents that you might consider saving in the project document section. It's pretty robust. And then two types of reports that you can access from eProject Express. One is the annual M&V summary. This lets you see your M&V snapshot for a single year. It's a simple one-page report that summarizes key information about your M&V results, including verified energy and cost savings. And on the right is the cumulative report snapshot. This provides a snapshot of how your project has performed year over year, including estimated, guaranteed, and verified annual cost savings. And finally, the analysis and reporting feature allows you to choose some preset reports, but you can also create custom reports to customize them to the data fields that you need. We also have added a separate data export function in EPX that allows you to download all of your project's data into an Excel file so that you can do more extensive analysis as you wish. And I'll hand it back to Liz.
Thanks, Dana. Okay, so now we're going to roll into the section. Laura, maybe you want to get on camera if you're there and talk about the additional. So DOE, US DOE does a lot of work with state and local organizations, the State and Community Energy Program. So Laura, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Liz.
Great.
And thanks also to LeeAnn for sharing your great insights and experience with us all today. Many of you that are tuning in today are likely familiar with the ESPC campaign, but for those of you that are not, if you're interested in accessing more content like today's webinar, learning more about eProject Express, and connecting with folks like LeeAnn, I highly encourage you to join this program. The ESPC campaign is a national initiative to engage non-federal public institutions in using energy savings performance contracts to upgrade facilities, to increase your efficiency and resilience, reduce emissions and utility expenses, and achieve lead by example goals. So through this campaign, we work with our partners to expand and enhance the use of ESPC by sharing tools, practical resources, best practice approaches. And this is done both through DOE technical assistance, as well as by bringing our partners together to share their own experiences and approaches. So through the ESPC campaign, DOE offers webinars, such as this one, as well as live virtual trainings on ESPC and measurement and verification, and virtual peer exchange opportunities as well. ESPC campaign partners also share and use their measurement and verification data to demonstrate their project or program savings and to communicate the benefits of their efforts to their communities. Public institutions across the non-federal sector are welcome to join, as well as market stakeholders such as energy services companies and owners' representatives, those third-party consultants LeeAnn was encouraging everybody to use. So if you are interested in joining, check out that website and see how to get involved. Next slide, please, Liz. If you are interested in exploring our DOE resources and trainings a little more on your own time and at your own pace, we have the Performance Contracting National Resource Center. This is a hub for all of DOE's best practice resources and solutions to support performance contracting in both the federal and non-federal markets. We have a number of guides, tools, templates, and trainings that are accessible through this portal, including the new PCNRC, for short, Training Certificate Series. This is a no-cost accredited training series that you can take on demand. There's 8 standalone modules on the ESPC process, best practices, as well as roles and responsibilities of each of the involved parties, including that of the third-party owner's representative. So this training supports professional development for both emerging and experienced professionals, and provides the opportunity for individuals to earn continuing education unit credits. Next slide, please. And then if you are looking for an even speedier way to get up to speed on ESPC concepts and want just a quick primer, the Guaranteed Energy Savings Performance Contracting University is a great option. This provides short, approximately 10-minute each podcasts or web like video on the website that you can use to kind of determine whether ESPC is right for you, or to kind of have the instruction on concepts all the way through scoping and then implementing your project. And so you have the full spectrum of hands-on training to do-it-yourself accredited training to quick primers that are available through DOE. And Liz, I'll hand it back.
Great, thanks. And yeah, thanks, LeeAnn. Thanks everyone here. So save the date. The next webinar in this series will be May 8th, 2024, and we will have Lindsay Hawes from the city of San Diego. So this will kind of have a focus on the municipal sector. She's going to talk about how she ramped up ESPC in her city. If you are interested in more information about eProject Express, you can go to eprojectbuilder.lbl.gov. You can register for an account there if you're interested, or you can just learn more by going to the About page or the Help page. And if you do have an account and you start using it, you can always reach out for free technical support by emailing epb-support@lbl.gov, or we have a phone message